the behavior is, if true, is certainly is something that is not becoming of anybody that's working with the state or thinks that they're going to continue working with the state.
Well, that's it for one of the allegedly embarrassing envoys the governor dispatched down to Philadelphia, only to have it blow up in everybody's face.
Holding the powerful accountable from Washington, D.C. to right here in southern New England. This is 10 News Conference with Gene Valicenti.
First, your top political stories of the week with winners and losers in the General Assembly, where the session just wrapped up, and the allegedly embarrassing envoys scandal. To get to that, Brian Crandall is joining me, our political reporter. All right, the governor dispatched 2 former executives to Philadelphia. Take a look at this project they do in Philly. Maybe it can work at the Cranston Street Armory. Pick it up from there.
Yeah, and a big mess.
Yep.
Jim Thorson, who was at the time the Department of Administration director,
yep,
and David Patton, who heads the state's property division, went to Philadelphia in March to visit Scout and a
yep,
project they have there. Scout has an initial contract to redevelop the Cranston Street Armory in Providence, which has long
yep,
been empty. They go down. A couple of days later, the company sends an email that says bad behavior, especially on
yep,
the part of Patton, racist, sexist comments,
right,
demanding behavior, dangling the Armory contract if demands aren't met, like a lunch at a fancy restaurant that was closed. And now, full circle this week, after the email was released last week, David Patton resigned on Thursday evening. Jim Thorson had left the department a couple months ago,
right,
which was pre-planned. But yeah, it's just not a good look. And you've got national publications,
right,
who are basically making fun of Rhode Island and the people we sent to Philadelphia.
New York Times, Washington Post, Philadelphia Inquirer. The background is McKee sends Thorson and Patton down. Go look at the Bach building and see if what they did there will work for our Cranston Street Armory. And they get down there and they allegedly make demands and make all kinds of sexist comments. The governor, as you said, fast forward, demands Patton's resignation. And the governor just spoke, as you and I, before we started taping, he's commenting on this further. Let's listen.
One thing that is important for Rhode Islanders to know is the proper procedures were followed in this case. The professionals in the state's legal department and Department of Human Resources worked with us to guide this process, ensuring it was as thorough and swift as possible. Due process can be painful. It can be slow, but it has a purpose. And due process is for everyone, whether you like them or you don't. Everyone is entitled to it, no matter how disturbing the allegations are, as they were in this situation.
Well, read between the lines, Brian. He took his time releasing that email. In fact, the governor didn't want to release the email complaint until the Attorney General told him to do so. So go ahead.
Well, the email was in hand a couple days after the trip in March. Us and other media outlets had asked for the email, didn't get it, and then the Attorney General ruled last week that it should be made public. And then now, a week after that, David Patton resigned, and then the governor says he called for the resignation based on the Human Resources investigation. But so it's been in hand for 3 months, but it's a week after the email comes out. And then the backstory here is that the state has not provided the funding to actually do the Armory project.
That's a whole other story. We don't even know if we want to do it anymore.
Well, right. And so I think, the implications and the questions kind of came full circle with that. Like, well, do they not want to do the project? And, who'd they send here? And why did this happen?
Right.
And again, I think that was also part of the questions about Patton making these comments about, like, I want the croissant and cold Diet Coke for the director. And, there's this $55 million project hanging in the balance.
There are also up to 3 separate investigations going on. One at the Ethics Commission, one with the state police, and maybe a third.
I do, but the ethics and the state police, the governor had asked the state police to do it. And then on Thursday, the Ethics Commission said that they were filing their own complaint. And the Ethics Commission will vote later this month as to whether or not they want to move forward with an investigation. And that focuses on kind of that demanding behavior. And then David Patton allegedly taking gifts along the stops that they made, some cheese and sneakers and blown glass. And then the Attorney General is complaining that he didn't know about the initial complaint that went to the state police. All right, stay on it, Brian. It's not done yet, even those two guys are gone. Right. The state police review of the situation is not over yet. Okay, Brian Crandall, thanks, our political reporter.
Now let's stay up at the State House. Starting next year, Rhode Island will join the federal government in recognizing Juneteenth as an official holiday. The General Assembly also approved the styrofoam container ban. That means restaurants won't be able to use foam boxes for food packaging anymore. And thirdly, lawmakers approved legislation to exempt the first $50,000 of tangible property from the personal property tax to help businesses statewide. The Senate President says that's a big help and a big win for small business.
We certainly tried to keep as much money in the pockets of residents of Rhode Island because of inflation issues and not knowing what's going to be coming up in the next third quarter and the fourth quarter of this year. So I'm really pleased.
Now, what didn't get passed? PTSD, non-taxed pensions for police and firefighters went down. Reforming the police officers' Bill of Rights, no action. And a few other bills, including the drunk driving bills that were pushed hard, no action on those. However, a bill to make the DOT director the board chairman of RIPTA, the bus agency, did pass. That's a real shot across the bow of Director Scott Avedisian, who's under fire to do a better job from the Senate President.
Not pleased with how they spent the money. Some of the money hasn't been spent. We just can't get a handle on it right now, and I think you need the new leadership down there.
The missions of RIDOT and RIPTA are very much at odds. You know, RIPTA is all about clean transportation. They're electrifying their fleet, whereas RIDOT is not in compliance with the acting climate.
So I think it's good, and I think that it will be helpful, and it's transportation, and Director Alviti has been very good at transportation as we keep on repairing roads and bridges in the state.
Well, the DOT director tells me he straightened out DOT, and he'll straighten out the bus agency as well. By the way, he also says only 3% of Rhode Island is served on the buses. That's got to go way up. He's Peter Alviti. He spoke to me on the radio on Thursday.
The chairmanship and the leadership brings with it a certain amount of influence that could bring the board and focus the board on particular issues that they have been focused on with leadership during the last several years. I think the chairman of the board and I'm having our attorneys take a look at the scope and breadth of the powers of chairmanship so that I can determine how best the chairmanship could be used to bring that kind of reform to RIPTA. That's what the governor, the Senate President, and the Speaker have charged me with in making this law. I didn't ask for this law to be put in place. They put it in place because they see a need for the kind of reform that we brought to DOT to be brought to RIPTA. That's the charge that they've given me, and I will try my best to execute their mission.
Peter, you also have your critics, people who think that you're not in love with public transportation, buses and things like that. Your answer to them is what?
Well, look, only 3% of our population here in Rhode Island are bus users. Therein lies one of the problems. In a state like Rhode Island, that percentage should be up in the teens, and it isn't. And it hasn't been for decades, and there's no movement to get us there, and there's no, I think, vision to get us to that point. The entire state invests in a system that a very small percentage of the state's population uses. That creates issues in garnering the public support for funding an agency like that. It's a challenge. I look at it as a challenge. I don't look at it as a stopping block. The reason some people view me, I've heard words like car-centric or highway-oriented. Well, the fact of the matter is, the bulk of the funding and responsibilities of Rhode Island DOT, the way it exists today, is to operate, maintain our highway system. And frankly, that's my responsibility, and that's a limit of my authority. And I've exercised in every way the judgment that I could to make things better in that realm. That doesn't mean that the same kind of reform or the same kind of success can't come with an agency like RIPTA. You look at the train station that we are in charge of trains. And one area of mass transit in Rhode Island that is operating on time, on schedule, is our train system that we at DOT are responsible for, which is a transit system.
Right, so the upshot is Peter Alviti, the DOT director, becomes the board chair of RIPTA, the bus company.